We are here to learn about what we can do to not waste our 20s. I'm going to react to this video that went viral very recently about this 30-year-old who said he wasted his 20s. And I'm going to give my own thoughts and input from studying a lot of successful people, being a personal development YouTuber and blogger for many years, and my own mistakes and lessons learned through my life since I'm almost done with my 20s. So let's just get started and hear what he has to say.
I'm 30 years old, and looking back at my 20s, in a way I completely wasted them. And in this video, I'm just going to explain how I did that, what was going through my mind, my belief systems, and why it's actually a paradox and a good thing that I wasted my 20s. And the reason for that being that it led me to where I am today. So
I'm going to stop it right there. I think most people have that, lesson learned. Like, your life is not over if you wasted your 20s. In fact, I think most people do. So let's see how he interprets it. I think many people interpret it positively to move forward productively.
let me explain. So my entire 20s, I was driven basically by my ego and its attempt to receive external validation from the world and other people. My ego was very fragile. It caused me to put on many different masks, wear many different costumes, metaphorical costumes, to impress other people. I wanted people to view me certain ways. I wanted them to view me the way I thought I should be viewed.
So there's a book on this, Lewis Howes's book, Mask of Masculinity. It's a bit more so about being what others perceive as a masculine man. And I think the 5 masks that people wear out of shame or ego to be someone they're not. Now, I think here he is doing it because he just cares a lot about others seeing him as a baller. Let's continue.
So I put on these masks hoping that they'd see me for who I wanted them to see me as. There's always something missing inside of me. I had a normal childhood. I had a great childhood, great family, a lot of friends, loving family and friends, good school, good opportunities. But there was always something missing. There was always something missing in here, so I sought it from.
Yeah, so it seems like he's saying that he didn't have any past childhood trauma or obstacles. He didn't have poverty or some abusive relationship. And you can still have issues despite that. But also, it's one of those things where he somehow developed that hole inside of him where he sought validation. For me, I think I care about success as well. And for me, it's more about I want to achieve that for my own happiness. And I thought that was what would achieve happiness. For him, as with many people, they have a hole that they're trying to fill with things that will never fill that hole. So let's see what he has to say.
From the outside world. In my early 20s, I decided to go to school for something that I knew would make me a lot of money, that would make my parents proud, that would make my friends think that I was successful. So I went to school for that. And I got a job afterwards for something directly related to what I went to school for, in hopes that people would view me as successful, view me as somebody who made it. And I did all that, and I got the job, and I worked the job, and I made a lot of money, all for other people, and all for the way other people viewed me.
So I'm going to stop it right there because this is a common mistake that is made, and I think it sometimes just comes from lack of awareness. No one really sets the course or really sits down with the person and tells them there's another way. So they just kind of, through environment and everything they absorb, social media, TV, movies, their life, they come up with their own ideas, oftentimes which are flawed and have been flawed for centuries. And he thought that he should do everything for the approval of others, and that would make him successful and happy and so forth. It's a very common issue. In fact, I just finished a book by Will Smith, and he had a very similar ailment. He had achieved everything he dreamed of. In fact, it was better than he dreamed of. He made more money than he ever expected. He got more Academy Awards and all these movie accolades than he ever dreamed. He was more famous than he ever dreamed. He was more successful. He had a great family. He was richer than he ever thought. And yet his life was crumbling apart. And when he really did an internal dive, went to meditation retreats, and reflected, for him, it came from seeking approval, which caused him to become a workaholic, and which caused him to never always feel restless when he wasn't working, and then realizing that you can't get approval and happiness from someone else and try and make that person happy. You can't make other people happy. You can only make yourself happy. So very common thing, especially certain cultures, Asian American culture, Asian immigrant culture. It's common to do a lot, not everything, like not always 100%, but a lot of things for other people, for family, for friends, whatever.
The thing about that is that people get to decide whatever they want to think about me. They get to believe what they believe. So even though I'm trying to do this, trying to make them see me a specific way, they may never not see me that way. So that's why it's very futile to seek external validation, because at the end of the day, I'm not the one who gets to decide what other people think of me.
Simply put, I think the best way to explain it is, if you base your own happiness on other people, that's like handing the remote control to your happiness to other people's whims, which are always fleeting, and you can never have something sustainable and something in your control. It's like a roller coaster. And I think one of the people that I first heard this from was someone that was interviewed in the Eventual Millionaire podcast. And Will Smith says this beautifully. He's describing his marriage, but he says, you cannot make someone else happy. You can make someone smile. You can make someone temporarily joyous or laugh, but it is their own responsibility to make themselves happy.
So I went and got this awesome job that at least I thought was awesome, and I thought other people would think is awesome, but in reality, I did not enjoy. I didn't get any fulfillment from it. I only got money from it. And that money just fed into my consumerism and materialism, which was also external validation seeking. Because once again, I wanted people to see me as somebody who is successful.
So notice here, everything he's doing is a continuous cycle of seeking others' validation. For me, it was never that pronounced. However, I did experience moments of shame, moments of just seeking others' approval when I couldn't get a good job after college. And that was a tough time for me because I didn't want to talk about the fact that I was still looking for work. And it was very hard to be vulnerable. And then when I was, sometimes I was punished for it because people were mean about it. And ultimately, some of that, looking back, was unnecessary. I shouldn't have been ashamed of that. I shouldn't have thought that you needed to be a success out of the gate of college, because many people aren't, and that's fine. They're still happy and they go on to become successes. Plus, the ones who end up doing that, it's just unpleasant for you, and it's based on a false belief that, because all these other friends and mostly acquaintances, not even people you really like, look down on you, that means that's your value. Not by any means. I mean, plenty of people are at one point in life, and then, 10 years, 20 years later, they are killing it in life. So who is that person to judge you?
I wanted to be respected. I was sort of the center of the universe in other people's worlds. I wanted to be the center of attention in other people's worlds. And once again, it doesn't work that way. I don't get to decide what the center of someone's universe is. But I spent my whole 20s doing that. I did everything based on external validation, and I had a complete external locus of control. I went and I bought a fancy like sports BMW, $80,000 vehicle, because I wanted people to see that and sort of have their jaws drop. Oh, he's got that car at that age. Man, he's made it. So I had the house, I had the car, I went and bought a bunch of expensive outfits. Like there were times where I was probably wearing, between all the items of clothing that I spent money on, I was wearing like close to $1,000 between all the layers.
You know, the funny thing is, if I would see him in public or I'd meet him, I'd be like, wow, he seems very successful. He's wearing rich clothes, he's spending money, he has a house, he has a car, a fancy car. I don't have that. He must have succeeded in all areas of life. It just goes to show you how the external world that someone puts on in real life or on Instagram or social media is not necessarily representative of really internally how they're feeling or where they're at in terms of success. And oftentimes we jump to the assumption that, man, that person's life is so much better than mine. They're just killing it just based on certain things we can see.
Layers of shirts and my pants and my fancy shoes and the fancy chain and rings and accessories and jacket. It was a lot of money I spent because that's what I thought because that way I could kind of control what people were thinking of me. Basically what I was doing was I was going to the circus dressing up as a clown and performing for people. And I was making an identity, multiple identities throughout the course of my 20s based on what I wanted people to see me as.
Yeah, so this one's definitely a bit more extreme of a case. But for me, I think it really comes down to like, why? Why are you doing this? And that's where you start to look internally. Why does someone want that external approval? For me, you know, I've definitely been in moments where I was like, man, I wish that person would like me. And then I would be like, you know, maybe I should be more charismatic and extroverted and all this stuff. And then it was like, you know, I'm putting all this on for that, and that's not even me. So it seems like he's doing all this, and you know, on some level he's able to achieve that career, to make that income. Not many people can do that, but internally he's just wrecked, because while you can control other people's perceptions to a degree, I mean, I'm sure all the fancy things he bought had some effect. You can't ever fully control someone's reaction, and perhaps they saw through that and they saw his internal world and his personality, or perhaps they bought into it but he still feels unfulfilled. It just goes to show you that, you know, basing everything on other people's views is just a terrible way to go about living a happy life. And it sucks because sometimes all we really want is someone to like us, and it comes sometimes from an innocent place but can spiral out of control.
I was a clown at the circus. And the thing about clowns that are professional clowns, they do all that. They dress up and then they go to the circus, but then at the end of the day they realize that that's not who they are. They wipe the makeup off and then they go home and live their lives. I never did that. I was 100% clown all the time. I would play tricks on myself and say, this is who I am. I'm this rebel, this guy who marches to the beat of my own drum. Like, I even got tattoos because I thought people would think I was cool. I had an image I had to.
Now this is interesting because I have thought about getting tattoos, but I've never really wanted one, and I've never gotten one. But I've thought about them because a lot of men have them. A lot of men get them, even Asian men. And, you know, people ask me, oh, I like tattoos. Are you ever going to get one? And I told others, probably never, because it's antithetical to who I am. I believe in like making sound decisions and like making something that is just wonky 10 years from now, or sounds cool now but looks just weird or unprofessional 20 years from now would be a bad move, and the impetus for me getting one has to be coming from a good place. And I realized that, the only draw at the time was to impress women, to put on this persona of like, oh, I'm more masculine and so on and so forth. And for me at least, and maybe some could argue, well, you should have still gotten one because that would have helped you out. I just found that very kind of like superficial and shallow and without substance. Where some people will get a tattoo because maybe their mom died, or Pokemon has meant a lot to them their whole life and they enjoy that hobby. It seems like he really took that to extreme, and I am vicariously living through his experience to see what it is like on the other end. Now, the other interesting thing is, in Will Smith's book, he mentions how the belief that your personality and values and everything is fixed is false, because he found through acting that through certain methods of acting, method acting, he started to adopt the beliefs, personality of characters into his own life, and he couldn't shake that. So, yes, you can actually change all those things, but to what degree? Can you change it drastically like this guy's doing? I think just from this video, it seems like naturally he's a more even-keeled, average guy. And if you're doing it from the wrong place, your heart knows it deep down. And I think that's the problem here. His intent is not right. So part of him is fighting that. Part of him saying like, no, you're not this crazy rebel guy. Like, it's too much of a shift for you, and you're doing too much, putting on this completely false persona, and that's wrong.
Give off. I had many expectations of people to see me a certain way. And yeah, sure, I did sometimes get some validation from people. People would ask me about my job. People would compliment me on my vehicle or the way I looked. But at the end of the day, it was nowhere near of what I expected of people, of the attention that I thought I should get.
Yeah, so I can picture what he's saying now. He has that fancy car, the BMW. He's got the suit on. He walks into the bar, and he's expecting in his head all these women to flock to him, and he's like the king of the party. And instead, he gets a couple dudes saying, hey, that's a nice car, and then resuming, drinking their beer and watching the game on the TV. Or maybe even one girl passes by and says, nice car, but that's it. So he has these huge expectations.
Puppies, come on. My whole sense of purpose and being was coming from the outside, but it was all on my terms. People had to see me the way I wanted to be seen, and nothing was coming from within here. This led to a lot of suffering, pain, and depression. It was all self-inflicted. I self-medicated with, substances, alcohol, and other illicit substances. My entire 20s, it's in my early 20s, it wasn't that bad, but as I progressed through my 20s, it built. The depression and the anxiety built. So I sort of treated all this pain with substances, and they worked for a time, and then they sort of lost their effect. When I was about 27, the anxiety that had been building in my body because of the way I was living my life, it had built in my body so greatly that it started manifesting in severe physical symptoms. One day I woke up while I was walking down my stairs, and I lost my balance and went into the wall. And for 3 months, I had no balance. I had to walk. Like, I had to widen my stance and walk sort of just to walk in a straight line. Looking back on it now, it's actually, I look back and I can kind of see the humor in it. At the time, it was complete darkness. The anxiety manifested in other forms too. It manifested as my whole body was spasming. I would feel sensation of paralysis in my limbs. I would get blurry vision, and I would get partial or complete blindness in one or both of my eyes.
Geez, so this is a lot. This is a lot to take in. So apparently, the disappointment of his expectations and the method he's using to achieve the happiness or whatever he's seeking, that failing caused him to spiral into depression and anxiety, which caused all the substance addiction and physical ailments. I mean, it just doesn't end. I have stuff to say about what I think I would recommend he do if I was in his case. But before we get to that, let's give him the opportunity.
This usually happened at night. It was a very scary time. The doctors thought I had MS, and there was a lot of testing that was done with no evidence. And one doctor thought that I should go on some Valium for the spasms I was having. And it fixed everything. The Valium is an anti-anxiety medication, and it fixed everything. All my symptoms were gone. Like within 2 days on Valium, everything was gone. So that doctor knew right away that I was suffering a psychosomatic anxiety disorder, and that's what it was. So I then started medicating in my late 20s heavily with alcohol and other substances that inevitably led to a mental breakdown when I was 29, and I ended up in a detox facility and rehab facility for 7 weeks, and that was the point where I sort of had a bit of a shift, and then I sought therapy, and I did some heavy therapy for 2 years, and that is where I learned to sort of disconnect from everything. So my entire 20s I was living through a great deal of pain and suffering, and it was a good thing. So I suffered a great deal through my 20s, and it was all worth it because it led to my breakdown, which inevitably led to a mindset shift, complete belief system reset. I thought I had to believe certain things to be who I was. I was not living as my own person. So this breakdown led me to this, and I was able to sort of rebuild and uncover who I truly was. I was able to disconnect from everything that I thought I needed to be. And I was able to disconnect from the fact that I can't control what other people think and what they think of me. That's not any of my business what people think of me. I can only be who I am. And people.
Yeah, so hats off to this guy. It seems like he did finally hit a point where his life is shifting towards the positive. So round of applause for that. Obviously, he went through a lot that probably requires some level of professional skill set to help with, and it seems like he did get therapy, and that probably helped a lot. So obviously, there's stuff to unpack here that goes deeper than this short video, and there's probably a lot of other small factors under the scenes, maybe small traumas of the past or something else that caused these belief systems. But it seems like, hats off to him. He's finally taken off the hat of certain beliefs around wearing masks and pursuing this life of excessive spending and validation. And so I think he's learned a few good lessons from that. I'm not going to venture to say that I have all the answers for him. Once again, perhaps a licensed therapist or someone who is a professional in that realm would be more beneficial in that respect. But I think just equating it to my own life, and if I were to give him any tips or anyone else watching, I think for me, I never had that level of it, but there are some similarities there that are worth mentioning. I think he very much cared about external validation, which led to physical ailments, which led to severe anxiety. I never had it manifest to that level, but I definitely had my 20s be one where I was something that I was someone who cared about to an extent. Being wealthy, being happy, loving what I do and being successful in relationships and all this stuff. And since I was that nerdy, skinny Asian guy who wasn't the most attractive, I didn't have a lot of that. I struggled to find a lot of that. And that caused me a lot of heartache for years, not just in terms of the the embarrassment or the shame, but really just like getting down on myself, dwelling on it, being unhappy, feeling hopeless, and that just caused a lot of sadness. I wouldn't venture to say depression, but sometimes close to a deep level of sadness or helplessness or hopelessness, and it just felt really bad. Fortunately, through my belief systems and values, I never had it get so bad that I had to resort to any drugs of any kind. And ultimately, through researching positive psychology and finding peace in a more minimal life, a simple life, finding peace in what I could have, I learned a lot from that. I learned that, you can get a lot from just a walk in nature, and you can be happy without having your life be picture perfect or close to it. And that's my mess and my story. And there's a lot more I can say about it, but let's let him finish.
People are going to think whatever they want of me, whether it's good or bad. That's out of my control. So yeah, in a way I wasted my 20s, but in a way it wasn't a waste at all. It wasn't a waste at all. It's a great paradox of life, because if I never went through what I went through, I never would have had the breakdown which led me to where I am today. And where I am today is much better than where I was in my 20s. And a lot of people, they go through life struggling, never really understanding why. And I should speak for myself, because everybody's life is different. But if I never would have had that breakdown, I could have went through my entire life lost. So I'm thankful that I went through the pain and the suffering, and I'm thankful for where that has led me today. So tell me what you think. Does any of this relate to your experience? The whole purpose of this video is to, if this can relate to you or anybody, I wanted to share this experience because maybe there's somebody out there that can kind of relate to what I'm saying.
Yeah, so here's really where I dive in and give you my thoughts and my, advice and my experience here, and what I relate to and what I think you can learn from. So first off, hats off to this guy once again, incredible. Even look just how he's dressed, you can tell that he's kind of toned it down and adopted more of a different lifestyle and belief system. I would have been curious to find out what those new things are, but he didn't really mention it. And I really think it's great that people are putting out this stuff and potentially helping lots of people out there. This video got 865,000 views. And imagine all the people it helped out to prevent from living the same life. One of the big lessons he stresses is you can't control what others think of you, so stop worrying about it. And I think that's true. There's a degree that it isn't, but we're not going to belabor that point. I will say that, if you have better fashion, if you have better hygiene, better hairstyles, those things make an impression on people. And I've seen it, even though I didn't like it sometimes. I was like, why are they, reacting better to me? But, there is a degree to that. But when you take it to an extreme, when you think everyone's going to love you for that, no, they may be a little bit more impressed. It may open a bit more doors when you dress nice, but it's not going to make you the life of the party or anything, from my experience. And so I think another thing was just his massive expectations. And I think for me, one thing I learned, and I'm very fortunate to have learned this, but it's always worth repeating because I can stray away, is Warren Buffett said you can either have an internal scorecard or an external scorecard. This man, David Mason, in this video, he mentions a external locus of control. An external scorecard is when you judge your success, your happiness based on other people's opinions of you. And Warren always said he had an internal scorecard. He judged himself by how he himself felt about himself, not what others thought. And the best way to describe his methodology is with a question, a little exercise problem. Would you rather be the most hated person in the world, but actually the most lovable person to your partner? Or would you rather be the most loved person in the world, but within the realms of your home, the most hated person with your life partner? And the point is to say that, you know, really, like, if you yourself know you're doing good, but the rest of the world doesn't, like, who really cares? Like, you know yourself and what's really happening behind closed doors better than them, and now you feel good and you can sleep well at night. Versus the opposite, which is basically the Bernie Madoff pyramid scheme situation, where everyone loves you, but you're really a fraud and you know, a destructive system. So there's a movie about this. It's called Wizard of Lies, and the guy in it represents like the real. I think his name's Bernie Madoff or something like that, who orchestrated one of the biggest pyramid schemes in the history of the world. And now that guy's in jail because they finally found out about it, and he was able to keep it running for decades. But even now, when interviewed in jail, he says he feels better in jail than he did outside of jail, because there was always that constant anxiety and disgust that he felt with himself during that time, even though he was rich, making money off fraud. So just think about that. Now, did he waste his 20s? If you actually look at a lot of the comments here, it actually, there's a lot of good stuff. It says, you didn't waste your 20s, you learned something from it, and now you have 60 plus years to grow. This other guy, Joe Baumgart, says, I work as a janitor, I just turned 30, I live in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, but I make such a difference in so many lives. These are the things we overlook. I'd rather be a good person than a rich person. And, a lot of very heartwarming comments here. And I think there's a lot to it. One person says, Sarah Wilson says, 30 is when life begins, especially when you've lived through childhood trauma. Now, I'm not amongst the extreme belief of Gary Vaynerchuk that, it's not too late, not until you're 70 or 80 years old. When you look at and that's because when you look at the life expectancy of humans, I think some of them, it's like 75 years old and you're dead. So it's not that extreme, but I'm in that direction of Gary, in the sense that 30, you still got plenty of time. Even 40, you still have some time to make some shifts. I know it sucks because 30 is the year where people just think, wow, that is when you're hottest, that's when you're most young and athletic and attractive, and that's when, that's the peak of your life, some people think, at least the fertility peak or the health peak. And so they assume like that's how the rest of your life is, but it's not. People spend decades to build a business, and it's really in their 40s sometimes when it really starts to take off, sometimes 50s, 60s. Warren Buffett's done some of his best work in the last couple decades, and he's like 80 something years old and still loving what he does and still very sharp. I think how this relates to me is essentially certain elements of validation. But when I look at my 20s, it was not this one thing like this man. It was a few different things that I have to reflect on and really think about. And I don't think I wasted them in that sense, but I do feel that perhaps I should have beaten myself up less in my head because of an image that I thought of how you should live your 20s, partially spurred by social media. People throw it in your face, and sometimes it's not, forced. It just happens. For example, Brett Conti, great New York City YouTuber, and he's just doing his stuff, living his life, hustling to get by. And now he's still in his 20s, but he's achieved, or I think he's at his 20s, he looks young. but he's achieved a good level of success. And so like I see a lot of videos on his social media that I follow him where he's just kind of showing off a lot, like look at me in my motorbike, and he's not intentionally doing it to like put it in your face or create a false belief, but some of that rubs off unintentionally. And I wish I could have told my younger self, hey, it's okay. Most people are not balling out and killing life, traveling the world, uh, partying up in Lamborghinis, having all this money, women, everything. Your 20s are your building years, and most people behind the scenes are just living boring, repetitive lives where they're hustling, grinding to make it. And so for me, that was a large portion of my 20s where it was very boring, where I wasn't making much money, but I had a decent job that I really liked, and I was just building that. And it's difficult when you see like other people on social media and it looks like they're partying, they have all this success in every area of their life, wealth, health, relationships, they got the six-pack abs, everything is figured out. And honestly, that hasn't been the case. I just been building, slowly building my physique, slowly building my health, slowly building my business, my wealth, my digital brand, slowly investing, saving, slowly just doing repetitive things. And I wish I could have told myself, like, it's okay. Don't feel helpless. Don't feel like you're behind in life, and so on and so forth. And so I'll do a deeper dive video on my own things I thought I wasted in my 20s, but that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.